He was born into a life where money was always missing. Not just missing in small ways, but missing in the kind of ways that shape how a person thinks, dreams, and survives. As a child, he learned early that silence often followed hunger, and patience followed disappointment. His home was small, crowded, and always one problem away from falling apart. Bills piled up faster than hope, and every new day felt like a quiet test of endurance. His parents worked hard, but hard work did not always bring rewards. Sometimes it only brought tired bodies and worn faces. He watched them stretch every coin, argue softly at night, and make choices no family should have to make. School trips were skipped, new clothes were rare, and celebrations were simple. Yet even in that life he learned kindness, respect, and the value of effort. Poverty taught him lessons no classroom ever could. As he grew older, he became aware of how the world treated people like him. Teachers spoke with less patience. Shop owners watched him closely. Strangers made assumptions without knowing his story. He learned to lower his eyes and keep his voice calm. He learned that being poor often meant being invisible, unless someone wanted to look down on you. Despite this, he carried big dreams inside him. He wanted more than survival. He wanted dignity. He wanted to walk into a room without feeling smaller than everyone else. He studied hard, worked part-time jobs, and stayed focused while others gave up. He believed that one day, things would change. That day seemed to come when he got a job opportunity in a wealthy part of the city. It was not a high position, but it was a door opening into a world he had never touched before. Tall buildings, clean streets, expensive cars, and people who spoke easily about vacations and investments. From the first week, he realized this world followed different rules. His coworkers talked about brands he had never owned and restaurants he could never afford. They asked casual questions that made his chest tighten. Where did you grow up? What do your parents do? Where do you live? Each question felt harmless on the surface, but dangerous underneath. The truth always brought silence or pity, and he had grown tired of both. At first, he answered honestly. He spoke about his neighborhood, his background, his simple life. The reactions were small, but clear. Conversations ended faster. Invitations never came. Smiles faded just a little. No one was cruel, but no one was warm either. That quiet distance hurt more than open insults ever had. So he began to change small things. Not big lies at first, just softer versions of the truth. He said he lived farther from work in a place that sounded better. He said his parents were doing fine. He avoided details. The change was subtle, but the results were immediate. People listened longer. They asked more questions. He felt seen. That feeling was powerful. For the first time, he felt like he belonged somewhere. He noticed how people treated him differently when they believed he came from comfort. They respected his opinions. They laughed at his jokes. They invited him to gatherings after work. Each small acceptance fed the lie a little more. Soon he realized that fitting in required more than words. Appearances mattered. He spent money he could not spare on better clothes. He bought second-hand items that looked new. He learned how to walk, speak, and behave like the people around him. Every morning, he carefully chose what version of himself he would show the world. At home, reality waited. The same small room, the same unpaid bills, the same worries. At work, he played a role that grew heavier with time. Each lie stacked on the last, creating a wall between who he was and who he pretended to be. Sometimes alone at night, he wondered if he was losing himself. Still, he told himself it was temporary. Just until he moved up. Just until he earned more. Just until he proved his worth. He believed that once he succeeded, the lies would no longer matter. He did not see it as deception. He saw it as survival. One evening, after a long day, he was invited to a small gathering by coworkers. A simple event, but one filled with people he wanted to impress. He hesitated, knowing the cost, knowing the risk, but he went anyway. He wore his best clothes, practiced his smile, and stepped into a world that felt both exciting and dangerous. That night, everything changed. In the middle of casual conversation and quiet laughter, he noticed someone different. Not louder than others, not dressed to stand out, just calm, observant, and present. While others talked about themselves, this person listened. While others compared status, this person asked thoughtful questions. When their eyes met, there was no judgment, no measuring look, just curiosity. When they spoke, the conversation felt easy. No pressure, no performance. He found himself relaxing in a way he had not felt in a long time. They talked about simple things, daily routines, work challenges, small joys. There were no questions about money or background, no quiet tests. He felt something unfamiliar growing inside him, comfort. For the first time since he started pretending, he forgot to act. He laughed naturally. He spoke honestly about feelings, though not facts. The connection felt real, and that frightened him more than rejection ever had. As the evening ended, he realized something dangerous had begun. He wanted to see this person again. Not as the version he created, but as the person he truly was. Yet he knew that the truth could ruin everything before it even started. Walking home that night, the city lights felt different. The lie that once felt like protection now felt like a trap. He had entered a world where pretending rich gave him access to something he never expected, connection that felt real, and with that realization came a fear he could not ignore. The more he pretended, the more he stood to lose. But at that moment, he did not know how to stop. All he knew was that his life had reached a turning point, one where every choice would matter, one where truth and desire would soon collide. And this was only the beginning. The days after that first gathering were unlike any he had experienced before. He found himself thinking about the person he had met almost constantly. Their calm presence, the way they listened, and the easy way they spoke without judgment stayed in his mind, replaying like a gentle melody. For someone who had spent years hiding, pretending, and watching the world from the outside, this feeling was both thrilling and terrifying at work. He tried to focus, but every email, every meeting, and every small conversation reminded him of the distance between him and the life he was pretending to live. The other coworkers continued their casual talks about travel, new cars, and weekend plans, while he felt more and more like he was playing a role in a story that did not belong to him. But the thought of seeing that calm, understanding presence again gave him a strange kind of hope. He found himself planning ways to run into this person again, which was something he had never done before. Usually, he avoided attention. He stayed in the background, never asking for favors, invitations, or recognition. But now, he wanted to be noticed, not for his lies or what he pretended to be, but for the spark of connection that had been ignited in that one evening. Finally, the opportunity came. They had to attend a company event together. It was a small, formal gathering, with people from other branches, some supervisors, and a few external clients. The thought of being around others who might see through his facade was nerve-wracking. But the pull to meet this person again was stronger than his fear. On the day of the event, he carefully chose his clothes, polished his shoes, and rehearsed a few casual lines that might make conversation easy. But the moment he arrived, he realized that nothing he prepared mattered. The person he had been thinking about was already there, casually observing the room, smiling at the jokes, nodding thoughtfully, and making everyone feel comfortable. He watched from a distance for a moment, unsure if he should approach. The world of wealth, luxury, and elegance was intimidating. But here was someone who made it feel simple, approachable, and human. It was like seeing sunlight filtering through clouds on a gray day. When he finally gathered the courage to speak, the conversation began naturally. They did not ask about his past, his family, or his finances. They spoke about hobbies, small routines, challenges at work, and dreams for the future. Each word felt effortless, and he realized that in this person's company, he did not need to act, pretend, or hide. For a few hours, he could simply exist as himself. They laughed together over minor work frustrations, shared small anecdotes from their childhoods, and exchanged thoughts about simple pleasures in life. The conversation flowed without pressure, without judgment, and without any of the subtle tests he was used to encountering. For the first time in years, he felt seen, valued, and understood, not for what he could buy, not for what he could pretend to be, but for who he was inside. As the night progressed, they found a quiet corner, away from the chatter and the music, and continued to talk. The topics grew more personal, more thoughtful, and more revealing. He spoke about his dreams, his fears, and the lessons he had learned from a life that had been far from easy. There was no judgment in their eyes, no dismissive gestures, only a quiet, patient presence that encouraged honesty. He noticed small details, the way they listened, the way they remembered small things he had mentioned earlier, the way they made space for him to speak without interrupting. Each detail made him trust them more, and each moment left him both exhilarated and scared. Exhilarated because he was experiencing genuine connection for the first time in a long time. Scared because he had spent years building a life on lies, and the truth felt dangerous in its vulnerability. When the event finally ended, they walked out together under the soft glow of streetlights. The city looked different to him now, not as intimidating, not as distant, not as a world to fear. The night air was calm, and the conversation continued, flowing as naturally as it had inside. He felt a sense of relief, as though a heavy weight had lifted. He realized that while he had been pretending to be rich, there was someone who could see him without the mask. Over the next few weeks, they met often, always in casual, simple settings. Cafes, parks, quiet corners of libraries. With each meeting, he learned more about them, their dreams, their fears, their simple joys. And with each meeting, he felt the walls he had built around himself start to crumble. Pretending to be someone else had become routine. But this person made him want to drop the routine and simply be. Yet the fear remained. Each moment of honesty was paired with the worry that his past, his poverty, and his lies would be discovered. He kept details of his home life, his finances, and his family carefully hidden, sure if revealing them would destroy the fragile bond they had formed. The more he grew attached, the heavier the fear became. There were moments of quiet reflection when he realized how rare this connection was. He had spent so much time trying to fit in, trying to survive, that genuine human connection had become almost foreign to him. Now that he was experiencing it, he cherished it, sometimes painfully aware of how delicate it was. One afternoon, while walking through a park, they stumbled upon a small street musician playing a melody that was both haunting and beautiful. They paused, listened, and watched as the music filled the air. In that shared silence, he felt a deep bond form, one that did not rely on words, money, or status. It was something deeper, something fundamental, something that reminded him that life was more than pretending. It was about feeling, sharing, and being present. But reality was never far away. After such moments, he would return home to the same small apartment, the same unpaid bills, the same struggles. The contrast between his two worlds was stark and exhausting. Still, he clung to the hope that one day he could live fully in the world where he could be himself. Without hiding, each encounter strengthened his resolve to keep improving himself, not just in wealth or status, but in honesty, character, and empathy. He realized that the mask he wore had given him opportunities, but it had also kept him from true connection. With this person, he began to understand that authenticity mattered more than appearances. Despite the joy, there were difficult nights. Nights when he would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how long he could maintain the facade. Nights when he worried about the lies catching up to him, about losing the person who had become so important. Nights when he questioned if love could survive on falsehoods. And yet, he also began to see a path forward. Not a path of wealth and pretense, but a path where he could gradually integrate truth into his life, where he could be honest about his struggles, his mistakes, and his background, where the person he cared about could see him for who he really was, perhaps accept him. By the end of that period, he felt both stronger and more vulnerable than ever before. Stronger, because he had found someone who could see beyond the facade, who could appreciate him for more than wealth or status. More vulnerable, because the connection was real, and real connections always came with the risk of pain, rejection, or loss. he understood that the next steps would be the most difficult. He could not keep pretending forever, and he had to decide when and how to reveal the truth. Yet, he also knew that the bond they were forming was worth the risk. For the first time, he was experiencing a love that was not about appearances, money, or social standing. It was about presence, understanding, and genuine human connection. And as he prepared for the next encounter, he carried both hope and fear, excitement and anxiety, knowing that the journey ahead would test him in ways he had never been tested before. But he also knew that this time, for the first time, he was not facing the world alone as the days went by. The gap between the life he was pretending to live and the life he truly had started to feel heavier. Each morning, he woke up in the small apartment with its cracked walls and peeling paint, listening to the distant hum of a city that seemed so much bigger than him. And each evening, he would meet the person who made him feel accepted, appreciated, and alive. The contrast was sharp, almost painful, and yet irresistible. He tried to push the thoughts of disparity away. He told himself that everyone had challenges, everyone had secrets, and everyone had moments they wished were different. But deep down, he knew that this difference was more than a secret. It was a wall he had built with each lie, with each carefully crafted story, with each borrowed item of clothing that disguised his true life. At work, he continued to impress people with his competence, charm, and seeming confidence. But behind the mask, he was always calculating. How much could he reveal without risking the trust he had just begun to build? How long could he maintain this persona without breaking? The questions were exhausting, yet necessary. The person he had grown close to seemed unaware of the struggle behind his calm demeanor. They continued to treat him with warmth, respect, and genuine interest, always asking thoughtful questions and listening with patience. They did not press for information about his past, his family, or his finances. That was part of what made the connection feel so real. He realized that here, for the first time, he could breathe without feeling trapped by his lies. Yet the weight of the lies became undeniable when invitations started coming. Dinners at upscale restaurants, casual weekends at friends' homes, small trips to places he had never seen. The thought of participating thrilled him, but it also filled him with anxiety. He could not afford the expenses, yet refusing could make him appear disinterested or awkward. He found himself juggling a delicate balance between wanting to be close and fearing exposure. One evening, they invited him to a small art exhibit, something that seemed casual yet sophisticated. It was the kind of event that required being presentable, articulate, and seemingly comfortable with the affluent world. He spent hours preparing, choosing clothes that were appropriate yet within his budget, rehearsing phrases, and practicing the smile that made him appear confident. When he arrived, he felt the familiar mix of excitement and dread. The exhibit was filled with people who moved through the space with effortless ease, discussing artwork as though it was second nature to them. He watched and listened, careful not to reveal any lack of knowledge. His companion guided him gently, introducing him to others, asking his opinions, and making him feel included. For a few hours, he allowed himself to forget the weight of his secret. He laughed, shared his thoughts, felt a sense of belonging he had never experienced. But when they stepped outside after the exhibit, the moment of quiet reflection returned. He looked at the city skyline, the lights twinkling like a distant dream, and the walls of his apartment came rushing back. The fear of discovery pressed against him again. How long could he continue this performance? And was the person he cared about capable of loving him if they knew the truth? The internal conflict was constant. He wanted to be honest, to remove the mask, but he feared the consequences. Losing the connection, the trust, and the warmth would be unbearable. He had never felt so seen by anyone, and the thought of losing that scared him more than living a life of pretense. In the midst of this struggle, small signs of attachment appeared. He began to care deeply about the other person's opinions, desires, and happiness. Their laughter became a source of joy, their silence a space of comfort. Each interaction left a lasting imprint, making the thought of exposing his true life feel even riskier. The more he connected, the more vulnerable he became. One weekend, they went for a quiet walk in a neighborhood park. The air was crisp, the trees painted in shades of green and gold, and the world felt peaceful in a way it rarely did. They talked about dreams, small daily pleasures, and the little things that brought them happiness. For a while, he allowed himself to forget his financial struggles, his past hardships, and the careful calculations he made every day. He felt human, alive, and appreciated. Yet even in these moments of peace, he could not escape the reality of his situation. The lies, the borrowed items, the stories he had crafted, all of it lingered in the back of his mind. Each time he laughed or shared a thought, he questioned whether the truth would come out and shatter everything. The tension was a constant companion, and he grew weary of carrying it alone. Despite the fear, he found himself opening more each day. He shared anecdotes from his childhood, small regrets, and the lessons he had learned from a life of struggle. He left out the details that might expose his poverty, but the essence of his experiences came through. And each time he did, the other person responded with understanding, empathy, and encouragement. Their presence was a balm, easing some of the pressure, yet also highlighting the fragility of his deception. One afternoon, they visited a small charity event. Volunteers, local families, and a sense of community filled the space. He observed the simplicity and honesty of people giving without expectation, and it struck him how far removed he had been from that kind of connection. As they walked through the venue together, he realized that the person he cared about valued empathy, kindness, and presence more than wealth or status. This realization brought both relief and anxiety. Relief because he saw a path to acceptance based on who he was inside. Anxiety because he knew the path required truth, something he was not yet ready to fully embrace. As weeks passed, the bond deepened and the walls he had built grew harder to maintain. Each smile, each shared story, each quiet moment brought joy, but also an underlying tension. He began to feel trapped in the life he had created, torn between wanting to continue the pretense and wanting to reveal his true self. The fear of losing the connection grew, yet so did the desire to be authentic. During quiet nights alone, he reflected on the choices he had made. He thought about the years spent pretending, the nights filled with anxiety, and the small victories that had kept him afloat. He realized that while the lies had opened doors, they had also created distance from himself, from honesty and from the possibility of real, lasting connection. The person he cared about continued to offer warmth and understanding, unaware of the internal struggle he faced. Each encounter reminded him of what he truly valued, not appearances, not wealth, not status, but genuine human connection. Yet the truth remained a mountain he was unsure he could climb. One evening, they walked along a quiet street after a casual dinner. He noticed the way their eyes reflected kindness and curiosity. The simplicity of the moment, the soft glow of streetlights, the calm night air, and the ease of their conversation made him ache with the desire to be honest. He wanted to share his life, his struggles, and his fears. But the words caught in his throat. He realized that the next steps would be crucial. Continuing the pretense could allow the connection to grow, but at the cost of increasing risk. Revealing the truth too soon could shatter the fragile bond they had built. Each choice carried weight, and he felt the pressure of time pressing against him. The longer he delayed, the more complicated it became as he walked home that night. The city lights seemed both inviting and intimidating. He knew he had to confront the duality of his life, the person he was pretending to be and the person he truly was. The path forward was unclear, but one thing was certain: the bond he had formed was worth the risk. It was worth the fear, the anxiety, and the potential heartbreak. And so, he resolved to continue, to navigate the delicate balance between pretense and truth, while cherishing the rare connection that had touched his heart. He understood that the journey ahead would test him in ways he had never imagined, but he also knew that genuine love, respect, and understanding were worth every challenge. For the first time, he began to believe that one day, he could merge the two worlds and be accepted for who he truly was. The tension had been building for weeks, and he could feel it pressing down on him more each day. Every moment with the person he cared about was filled with warmth, laughter, and shared thoughts. Yet the weight of the lies he had been carrying was becoming unbearable. Pretending to be someone he was not had brought him close to happiness. But it had also created a constant fear that everything could collapse at any moment. He knew that the truth had to be revealed, yet he struggled with the timing. Each day he delayed. The risk grew, and the bond they had built began to feel fragile. He was torn between fear and desire, anxiety and hope, secrecy and honesty. For the first time, he realized that love required courage, and courage meant risking everything he had worked so hard to create. One evening, they planned a quiet dinner at a small, cozy restaurant that neither of them had been to before. The setting was intimate, the lights soft, and the atmosphere calm. He felt a mix of anticipation and dread as they were seated, knowing that this could be the night he would finally speak the truth. The thought of exposing his real life, his struggles, and his lies filled him with a deep fear of losing the person who had come to mean so much to him. Throughout the meal, he tried to maintain his composure, but every glance, every smile, every moment of shared laughter reminded him of the delicate balance he had been maintaining. He wanted to be honest, to show the person the man behind the mask, but the words stuck in his throat. He feared the reaction, the potential disappointment, and the possibility of losing everything he had found. After dinner, they walked through the quiet streets, the night air cool and calm. The city was peaceful, a stark contrast to the storm of emotions he felt inside. Finally, unable to hold it any longer, he took a deep breath and began to speak. He started slowly explaining that there were things about his life he had not shared, fears he had kept hidden, and struggles he had faced. He spoke about his upbringing, the financial difficulties, and the years spent pretending to be someone he was not. As he spoke, he watched for any reaction, any sign of judgment or disappointment. He saw none. Instead, there was silence, a quiet presence that seemed to absorb every word, every truth, and every vulnerability he laid bare. For a moment, he feared that the silence meant rejection, but then he saw understanding in the other person's eyes. There was empathy, patience, and a calm that made him feel seen in a way he had never experienced before. He continued, revealing more details of his past, the moments of struggle, and the fears that had haunted him for years. Each word was heavy yet liberating. He realized that the truth, though difficult to share, carried a weight that could no longer be borne alone. The act of revealing himself brought a strange sense of relief, as if a burden he had carried for too long was finally lifting. When he finished, there was a long pause. He feared that the bond they had formed would shatter, that the warmth, laughter, and shared moments would vanish. But then, a hand reached out and gently touched his arm. The person smiled softly, and in that smile he saw acceptance. They spoke quietly, reassuring him that the past did not define him, that the lies were understandable given the circumstances, and that the connection they had formed was real. He felt a wave of relief, gratitude, and unexpected joy. The fear that had dominated his thoughts for weeks melted away, replaced by a sense of freedom he had never known. For the first time, he realized that vulnerability could be a source of strength, and honesty could deepen the bond he had formed. Over the following days, their relationship began to transform. The walls he had built around himself started to crumble, and the mask he had worn so carefully was no longer necessary. They shared more openly, laughed more freely, and enjoyed moments together without the constant tension of pretense. Each day was a reminder that love, trust, understanding could flourish when truth replaced fear. He also began to notice small changes within himself. The anxiety that had plagued him for years began to ease, replaced by a growing sense of confidence and self-acceptance. He understood that the journey had been difficult. It had led him to a place where he could be genuine, appreciated, and loved for who he truly was. Even so, challenges remained. The world outside their connection still carried expectations, judgments, and assumptions. He knew that maintaining authenticity would require ongoing effort, honesty, and courage. But now he felt equipped to face these challenges with a renewed sense of purpose and a strengthened heart. They continued to explore life together, sharing experiences, supporting each other, and building memories that were rooted in truth and mutual respect. The bond they shared deepened, not because of appearances or pretense, but because of the vulnerability, honesty, and understanding they had cultivated through it all. He learned that the most meaningful connections in life were built on trust, empathy, and the willingness to be seen fully and authentically. He realized that pretending to be someone else might open doors, but it could never create the lasting joy, fulfillment, and love that came from embracing one's true self. By the end of this chapter in his life, he felt transformed. The fear of being discovered was replaced by the confidence of being accepted. The weight of lies lifted, leaving space for genuine connection, laughter, and shared dreams. And most importantly, he discovered that love was not about status, wealth, or appearances. It was about honesty, understanding, and the courage to be vulnerable. In these moments of clarity, he understood that the path forward was not about pretending or hiding. It was about embracing who he truly was, trusting that the people who mattered would see and accept him. And in doing so, he found a love more powerful, enduring, and meaningful than anything he had ever imagined. After the truth had been revealed, life took on a new rhythm. The heavy burden of pretense was gone, replaced by a fragile but genuine sense of trust and connection. He woke up each morning feeling lighter, though still aware that the journey ahead would have challenges. Honesty had opened the door, but now he had to learn how to navigate life with authenticity in every step. The person who had stood by him through the revelations became more than just a companion. They became a partner in understanding, patience, and shared dreams. They did not judge him for the years of struggle, the lies born of fear, or the small insecurities that had guided his actions. Instead, they offered support, laughter, and a quiet reassurance that love could thrive even when it had been tested. He began to rebuild his life with renewed purpose. The small apartment that once felt confining became a space of possibility rather than limitation. Each day he focused on his work, personal growth, and the relationships that mattered. No longer weighed down by lies, he found clarity in his decisions, energy in his pursuits, and joy in simple moments he had previously overlooked together. They explored the city in ways that were authentic and meaningful. Walks through parks, quiet dinners at local cafes, and visits to art exhibits and small cultural events became their shared world. These moments were no longer colored by fear of discovery or the need to impress. They were genuine experiences shared between two people who valued presence, understanding, and empathy. He also began to reflect on the past with a new perspective. The struggles of his childhood, the years of financial hardship, and the need to pretend were no longer sources of shame. Instead, they became lessons, shaping his resilience, empathy, and ability to connect deeply with others. He realized that every hardship had prepared him for this moment, the ability to love authentically and be loved in return as the bond between them deepened. He found that the small joys of life took on new significance. The laughter shared over a cup of coffee, the quiet moments of reflection in the park, and the supportive conversations during difficult times became the foundation of a love built on trust and mutual respect. Every interaction, every shared smile, and every act of kindness reinforced the connection they had created together. Challenges did not disappear. There were still moments of doubt, moments when the world's expectations and judgments threatened to intrude. There were times when he questioned whether the connection could withstand the pressures of life beyond their shared moments. But these challenges were faced together with honesty, patience, the commitment to understanding each other. In these moments of difficulty, he learned the value of communication, expressing fears, sharing insecurities, and listening with empathy became essential tools in maintaining the bond they had built. He discovered that vulnerability was not weakness, but a source of strength, allowing them to navigate life's uncertainties with mutual trust and care. Their relationship grew not because of wealth or appearances, but because of the depth of connection they had cultivated. They supported each other's growth, celebrated successes, and faced setbacks together. Each day reinforced the understanding that love was about presence, empathy, and authenticity. Not material possessions or social status, he also began to mentor himself in areas he had neglected while maintaining pretense. Financial management, personal development, and emotional intelligence became areas of focus, allowing him to grow as an individual while remaining grounded in honesty. The lessons learned from years of struggle and pretense informed his decisions, helping him build a life that was sustainable, meaningful, and aligned with his values. The person who had once been a source of warmth and understanding became a partner in creating a shared vision of life. They discussed hopes, dreams, and future plans openly, without the need for masks or deception. These conversations were filled with possibility, creativity, and mutual respect, reflecting the strength of a bond built on truth. As time passed, he noticed subtle but powerful changes in himself. Confidence replaced insecurity, calmness replaced anxiety, and clarity replaced confusion. He understood that the journey from pretense to authenticity had not only strengthened his relationship, but had also transformed him into a person capable of deep empathy, trust, and love. They celebrated milestones together, small and large, always with an emphasis on shared experiences rather than material displays. Birthdays, anniversaries, and personal achievements were marked with thoughtful gestures, meaningful conversations, and the simple joy of being present with each other. Each celebration reinforced the understanding that true happiness comes from connection, not wealth. The lessons from the past remained present, but no longer defined him. He carried the experiences of struggle, pretense, and fear as reminders of the resilience, empathy, and understanding that had been forged through adversity. These lessons informed his choices, guided his interactions, and strengthened the love he shared with his partner. One day, as they sat together watching the sunset, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The path had been difficult, filled with fear, uncertainty, and moments of doubt. But it had also been filled with growth, learning, and the discovery of a love that was genuine, enduring, and transformative. He realized that every challenge, every lie, and every risk had been a step toward this moment of clarity, connection, and fulfillment. In these moments of reflection, he understood the true meaning of love, trust, and authenticity. He saw that life's greatest rewards were not found in appearances, wealth, or status, but in the courage to be oneself, the willingness to be vulnerable, and the commitment to building connections rooted in truth. The bond he had forged was a testament to the power of honesty, empathy, and human connection. As their journey continued, he carried the lessons of the past into a future filled with possibility. He embraced the present fully, cherishing each shared moment, and looked forward to a life built on authenticity, trust, and mutual respect. The love he had found was no longer fragile, no longer threatened by lies, but strong, enduring, and grounded in the truth of who he truly was. And so, from the struggles of poverty, the weight of pretense, and the fear of loss, he emerged transformed. He discovered that real love begins when pretending ends, that vulnerability can be a source of strength, and that authenticity is the foundation of a meaningful, fulfilling life. The journey from pretending to be rich to living with honesty had not been easy, but it had led to a love more powerful and enduring than he had ever imagined: life. After honesty brought a different kind of challenge. The relief of truth no longer weighed heavily on him, but a new reality had taken its place. Relationships were no longer built on fear or pretense, yet the path ahead required effort, understanding, and patience. He realized that even after revealing the truth, life demanded work, commitment, and constant attention to the bonds that mattered most. He and his partner continued to grow closer, exploring life together with a renewed sense of freedom. Every morning, waking up in their shared space felt like a gift. They cooked breakfast together, laughed over small mistakes, and shared plans for the day. Simple routines, once overlooked, became treasures. Every small moment was a reminder that life could be rich, not because of money or appearances, but because of connection, laughter, and mutual care. At work, he began to carry himself differently. The pretense that had once been necessary was gone, replaced by genuine confidence. He spoke more openly with colleagues, offered support when needed, allowed himself to enjoy the work without constantly worrying about judgment. The relationships he built were no longer transactional or based on appearances, but rooted in honesty, respect, and understanding. He realized that authenticity attracted not only genuine friendships, but also new opportunities. They traveled together, but differently than before. Instead of luxury trips meant to impress, they explored small towns, local markets, and hidden corners of the city. They discovered art in unexpected places, music in quiet streets, and joy in the simple acts of discovery. Each adventure strengthened their bond, teaching them to appreciate life beyond material wealth. They learned that memories made together, however small, were far more valuable than appearances or status. Financially, he continued to work diligently, but now with a focus on sustainability rather than impressing others. Every purchase, investment, and decision was made with thought and care. He no longer chased status or approval. He built a life that aligned with his values. The lessons of his past hardships guided him, reminding him that wealth was only meaningful when it enhanced life, not defined it. Challenges still arose. There were moments of insecurity, lingering fears of judgment, and the occasional shadow of past struggles. Yet these challenges were faced with honesty and communication. They shared worries, discussed mistakes, and planned solutions together. Each challenge became an opportunity to strengthen trust, deepen understanding, and grow as individuals and as a couple. Through these experiences, he discovered the power of gratitude. He learned to appreciate the small victories, the quiet moments, and the people who made life meaningful. Gratitude became a daily practice, shaping his perspective and allowing him to see abundance in the ordinary. The journey from pretense to authenticity taught him that richness was not measured in possessions, but in relationships, experience, and personal growth. They also found joy in giving back. Inspired by their own experiences with struggle and kindness, they engaged in small acts of service, helping neighbors, supporting local charities, and offering time and attention to those in need. These acts strengthened their bond, brought purpose to their lives, and reminded them that fulfillment came from connection, generosity, and empathy. As months turned into years, their love matured. It was no longer fueled by excitement alone, but rooted in understanding, patience, and shared values. They learned to navigate disagreements without judgment, to support each other's ambitions without envy, and to celebrate achievements without comparison. Each challenge became an opportunity to reinforce commitment and trust. He reflected often on the journey that had brought him here. The years of poverty, struggle, and pretense had been painful, but they had also shaped his resilience, empathy, and perspective. The fear of judgment, the lessons learned in secrecy, and the courage required to reveal the truth had prepared him for the life he now lived, one filled with love, authenticity, and purpose. The person who had stood by him through it all became not just a partner, but a mirror reflecting his growth, courage, and potential. They celebrated each other's progress, reminded each other of strengths, and offered comfort during moments of doubt. Together, they had built a life where honesty, empathy, and shared dreams guided every step. Even simple moments were now cherished. Sharing coffee on a quiet morning, listening to rain against the window, watching the city lights flicker at night, these became rituals of connection. They reminded him that life's true wealth lay in presence, understanding, and mutual support. He also began mentoring others quietly, sharing lessons from his journey without judgment or pride. Friends, co-workers, and those younger or struggling looked to him for guidance, and he offered it with sincerity and patience. The act of helping others strengthened his own sense of purpose, reinforced the value of honesty, and created ripples of positivity that extended beyond their immediate lives. Over time, he noticed changes in himself that went beyond circumstance. Patience replaced urgency, empathy replaced judgment, and clarity replaced anxiety. The transformation was not just about love or status. It was about living in alignment with his values, embracing authenticity, and finding meaning in connection and growth. Looking back, he understood that the path from poverty and pretense to authenticity and love was neither simple nor easy. It had required courage, resilience, and a willingness to face fear. But it had also brought rewards far beyond anything. Material love that was enduring, a life that was fulfilling, and a self that was confident, empathetic, and genuine. In the quiet moments, when he reflected on the journey, he felt gratitude not just for the love he had found, but for every lesson, every struggle, and every risk that had brought him to this point. He realized that life's true richness was not in what one owned, but in the courage to be oneself, the connections nurtured, and the love shared authentically. And so life continued, filled with shared moments. Small joys, meaningful work, and the enduring presence of someone who had seen and accepted him fully. The journey had begun with pretense and fear, but it had ended in truth, connection, and the realization that love and life are most beautiful when lived authentically. Every day became a celebration of honesty, growth, and the profound joy of being truly known and accepted.